Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome back to Synth Stuff. This week we are going to be talking about the top 11 synthesizers that you can buy used for under $600. Coming up. If you've been paying attention and are subscribed to this channel, and if you're not, why not? Click subscribe, because then you get notified when I post these videos. Last week, I put out a video that covered the top 11 synthesizers that you can buy new for under $600. I'll put a link to that video right here, as well as in the description below. I also did a video that was the top 10 synthesizers for beginners from last year. I'll put a link to that again here and in the description below. This week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This time it's the top 11 synthesizers that you can buy used for under $600. And the qualifications are they have to be polyphonic, at least 4-voice polyphonic. They have to have physical controls, so that means like filter and amplitude and maybe effects if it has effects. And it has to have a physical keybed on it. We're not talking modules here. When we talk about new synthesizers, we have a kind of limited pool from which to pick from, but when we start getting into used, we've got 40 plus years of synthesizers to pick from, and the pool gets pretty big. So I had to be a lot more selective in choosing these, and in doing so, I tried to pick synthesizers that are either relatively recent, so they're going to be in good shape, or for some older ones that are known to be rugged and reliable and should be still working quite well in working order if they haven't been too beat up on the road. Last week's list I did in price order. This week's list I'm just doing in random order, no order whatsoever. So these are not in any particular order, but they are all great synthesizers. First on my list is the Cobalt 8. It is basically the 37 key version of my Cobalt 8X. It has all the functionality of the 8X, 8 virtual analog voices. It has a beautiful FTAR keybed with channel aftertouch. It has a beautiful set of filters that Modal has put into the Cobalt 8. And it also has some pretty decent effects. The reverb is maybe not the greatest, but most of the other effects are really quite good. They're all DSP effects. The Cobalt 8 is notable that a lot of the things that you do in subtractive synthesis, there's many things that you could do where you end up with no sound at all, or where you do something that doesn't make sense and you get either no sound or a bad sound. And the Cobalt 8 is designed, it's really intelligent design on the user interface, so that when you turn a knob to something that wouldn't make sense, that it wouldn't produce a usable sound, it either doesn't let you do that, or it shifts to something else and does it a different way, so that you actually get more use and more different sounds and a variety of sounds out of it. That attention to detail and design is present throughout the Cobalt. It really makes it an enjoyable synthesizer to use and program as a sound designer. I do wish they had categorization of the patches. That's really one of the faults of the Cobalt, is that your patch storage is just hundreds of patches in no order and no organization whatsoever, and you can't sort them or filter them. You just have to scroll from one through the other. That's a really big downfall of the Cobalt 8. However, it does have the Modal app, which is the companion app that you can plug into a laptop or iPad or what have you, and it lets you edit and manage your presets as well as edit your sounds in real time on the screen of your computer, which kind of helps not having the categorization on the synthesizer. And that Modal app is probably the best companion app I've ever seen for any synthesizer ever. It's so good. Modal did such a good job. I wish all the synthesizer manufacturers would put out a companion app as good as Modal app. Now, all the prices I mentioned are going to fluctuate because obviously it is the used market, but the prices that I'm quoting are average prices that these are selling for right now. And the Cobalt 8 sells for around $549, which is a pretty good deal for a 37 key virtual analog 8-voice with a aftertouch enabled FTAR keybed. Similar to the Cobalt 8 is the Argon 8. It's a different color. The panel layout looks much the same. The internal engine is completely different. Whereas the Cobalt 8 is virtual analog, the Argon 8 is wavetable. It has a wavetable synthesis engine with up to 32 oscillators using those wavetables internally. and it can morph between the wavetables with high resolution morphing. So it's not just fading from one to another, it actually interpolates between the two of them as it fades from one to another, and allows you to gradually morph those sounds. And that morphing can actually be the destination of an LFO. So you can actually cause that morphing to be part of the sound itself. It's a really flexible synthesizer. It has all the same features as the Cobalt 8 in terms of filters and effects and aftertouch and sequencer and all that stuff. The main reason I don't have one is because a lot of what the Argon 8 does, I have duplicated in the Hydrasynth. So because of that, I didn't ever buy an Argon 8. But if a powerful and interesting sounding wavetable synth is one you're looking for, maybe the Argon 8 should be on your list. It's typically sells for a little bit less than the Cobalt 8. Right now it's going for about $500 on the used market. And again, I will put links to all of these on Reverb in the description below, so if you want to have a look and see what they're currently selling for, just click on that link and you'll be able to see that. The third one on the list is one that I actually have a love-hate relationship with. I absolutely love my Korg wave state, but man, I hate programming it. It's not the easiest thing to program and to get your head around. It is kind of complex. However, it is a remake of the original Korg wave station, but it does so much more. It can take samples and play them and sequence them and morph them and layer them and pitch them and time them. And it basically, by doing all these different things with different kinds of sounds, you can just get otherworldly sounds that you've never heard a synthesizer make before. Nothing in the world sounds like a wave state, honestly. Of course, it can play samples, so that means those samples could be drums, and that means you can have a rhythm layer or drums accompanying it in the wave state built into the patch, which is really kind of fantastic. One of the main failings of the wave state is the miserable keybed. They really put a budget keybed in it. It's velocity sensitive, it does not have aftertouch. I typically play my wave state from the montage or something with a decent keybed just because it's not a nice experience. You can get the wave state with all the presets in it. There are many people out there who make preset packs for it, so if you're not up to programming the wave state, then you're not lost. You can still use it for all kinds of different things. It's great for, I mean, it's a monster for TV. If you want to do TV or film scoring and you can get your spooky sounds and orchestra and you know, bangs, and if I was going to be doing scoring or Foley or effects, that sort of thing, I would definitely have a wave state in my arsenal. Korg recently discontinued the wave state and created a new wave state, which I think they called Mark II, that has a little bit more polyphony and a little bit more storage in it, but the original wave state is still available on the used market for only $500. That's a steal for this synthesizer. Honestly, go listen to some videos of people playing the wave state and then see what they've done with it and see the sounds it can make. And if that appeals to you, really go pick one up because it's really a fantastic synthesizer. So for $500, again, link in the description below, go get your wave state. Also from Korg, right next to the wave state is the Op6. The Op6 has been discontinued in some markets, but I think it's going to be coming available again soon. The Op6 is a pure FM synthesizer, so it can do a lot of what the original Yamaha DX7 did. And in fact, you can load DX7 patches into the Op6. However, whereas the DX7 had a horrible user interface for doing sound design, the Op6 makes FM fun. Believe it or not, you can actually just play with it and see what the controls do and alter the sounds, and you can get some really interesting sounds out of it. Not only does it have the FM engine, but you have filters and all sorts of effects and things that you can add on after the fact. That really means it can create sounds that you're not going to hear from pretty much any other synthesizer. It's very digital. It's a digital sounding synth. I mean, as far as you can get analog-ish sounds out of an FM synth, but typically an FM synth makes FM kind of sounds, and you hear that and you know it's a digital FM synth. Op6 is no different. The Op6 for doing sound design is much easier to use than the wave state. It's actually fun to do FM design on it. Unfortunately, it's saddled with the same crap keybed that they put on the wave state, so I mean, it's usable. It's a usable keybed, but you aren't going to really want to play it if you have anything better like a montage or anything else with a better key bed or more keys than the 37 keys it comes with. The Op6 is also available on the used market for about $500, link in the description below. The third Korg synth on this list is one that I don't have. It is the Korg ModWave. It is the same format, layout, 37 key plastic enclosure as the Op6 and the WaveState. It looks very much similar to those two synthesizers. However, it is a digital wavetable synth, much like the Argon 8. Like the Argon 8 is a 2 oscillator. You can morph between the wavetables just like you can on the Argon 8. A couple differences with the ModWave is that it has a trackpad on it, and it has built-in chaos physics where you can have a ball that bounces around and simulates physics, and then you can assign that as a source in your mod matrix, which gives your digital sounding synth kind of an organic feel because things are changing in an odd way that you wouldn't expect from a digital synthesizer. It also has the same motion sequencing that the WaveState has, where you can put sequences in that alter filters and chaos physics and things as the sequence plays, and that again adds to the chaos and changing and morphing sounds that come out of that synthesizer. Again, because it's a wavetable that kind of duplicates what I have in the Hydrasynth, it's not one that I have here, but it is a very viable wavetable synthesizer that produces some incredible sounds. $580 on the used market, link down below. All right, so we got to talk about some older synths, and if you're going to talk about an older synth, how about the Yamaha DX7 itself? Yes, the DX7 is still available on the used market. The condition of them varies greatly. You will find some that look like they've been dropped off the back of a truck. You will find some that live their life in the studio that are in great shape. However, they are a solid steel case. They have an almost indestructible key bed. They've actually survived quite well. Most of the DX7s that I find today are still quite playable. They're might be scratched and banged up a bit, but they still work and everything works on them properly. Of course, the DX7 is famous for having the worst user interface ever, where you have to do all the programming and all the configuration through a single LCD line and one slider input. I don't know what they were thinking, but hey, it is what it is. You have those awful membrane buttons as well. However, it sounds great. It sounds like a DX7, and you can get an infinite number of patches for the DX7 for free on the internet. There's thousands and thousands of them from the past 30 years or 40 years or however long the DX7 has been around. I think it's close to 40 years. 87, yeah, it's a long time. So all the patches that people have made for the DX7 in that time are available. You can download them on the internet and put them in your DX7 and go wild. Usually around $600, so right at our limit, but for $600 you'll get a decent DX7 and you can use it on stage. It's rugged, reliable. If nothing else, you can use it as a controller as well, and it's got a pretty decent key bed, a nice feeling key bed on it. Next on the list, the Korg MS-2000. This is one of the very first VA virtual analog synthesizers. It only has 4 voices of polyphony. However, it does have a really crisp and clear sound that for some reason you don't hear in VA today. I think they're trying to emulate more of an analog synth with noise and softness to it, whereas back in the late 80s when these first came out, the first VA synths came out, they weren't really sure of how to do that sort of thing, so they were just sledgehammer analog, virtual analog emulation, and the result was analog-ish sounding, but it's very crisp and almost digital as a result. The MS-2000 has 8 different waveforms available on 2 different oscillators plus a noise channel. The 8 different waveforms are because it's digital, so you aren't limited to whatever an analog circuit can produce, you know, your typical square and sawtooth and triangle and whatnot. Because they could make it do whatever the computer says it can do, they have all kinds of different oscillators on it that give it a lot more capability to create different sounds. It also has onboard effects, which not very common in synthesizers back then. Most of the synthesizers relied on outboard effects, but the MS-2000 had some limited onboard effects that really give it a little bit more width and oomph to it. For $570, the MS-2000 is a solid buy. I think that's a pretty decent price for a solid synthesizer that sounds good. The next one everyone's going to know because it is the best-selling synthesizer of all time, the mighty Korg M1. This is a massive workstation synthesizer, minimal user interface, terrible user interface, but the sound capabilities of this thing were monstrous. It was used by everyone. You will hear the M1 in all kinds of music of the era. Its piano was famous and used absolutely everywhere. It has drums, it has organs, it has everything in it. These were incredibly expensive, but because Korg made so many of them, there's lots of them available and the price is not too high. It has 16 voices of polyphony, and it is a sample-based rompler, but it also has subtractive synthesis on top of it, kind of like the Montage. So it has waveforms or samples of, for instance, a sawtooth or a super saw or all these different analog sounds that you can run through its subtractive synthesis engine. So far more than a rompler, you could also use it as a synthesizer, just like the Montage. M1, incredibly capable, really nice keybed, miserable user interface. You don't want to do a lot of sound design on it, but it has a ton of sounds in it, and there are millions of sounds available for it. $600 on the used market, can you believe it? A real deal. If you want a decent keybed, you could use it as a stage piano, you could use it as a stage controller, use it in your studio. $600 in the description below. Another early virtual analog synthesizer, the Korg DW8000, 8 voices of virtual analog polyphony. It sounds monstrous. Has onboard delay-based effects, so delay, chorus, flange, phaser, that sort of thing. This was used by everybody who did dance and electronic music. It was used by absolutely everybody. It's a fantastic sounding synthesizer. Sound design on it is pretty miserable because, like the DX7, all the programming is done through a single slider that does all the data entry. I don't know why they thought that was a cool thing back then. It was a terrible idea then. It's still a terrible idea today. Don't buy the DW8000 if you're looking to do sound design. Perfectly fine to download sounds off the internet and use them that way. I wouldn't recommend it for sound design, but if you are doing electronic EDM, or if you want to do 80s synthwave or any kind of harsh electronic EDM sound, the DW8000 should definitely be on your list, and it's only $500 used. The one caveat, the DW8000 has a bit of a problem with capacitors on the board. Look for one that's actually been recapped or recently serviced that specified that they replace the capacitors, or else you're going to be ending up having to do it in the near future. Another early VA synth is the Roland JP8000. Roland's trying to bring the Jupiter into the digital age, and here is their entry. Lots and lots of front panel controls on this. Out of all the synths on this used list, I think this is the one that I would like the most, and I'll probably end up buying one at some point. This has a small ribbon controller on it. It's got tons of EDM and trance and rave sounds in it. This is the rave and dance monster synth. It's where the Roland Supersaw originated, so that huge overlaid chorus sawtooth sound that Roland made famous, this is where it came from, and it's used all throughout dance music of the era. This is a fantastic synth. It's a little bit delicate because it's a plastic case, so try to find one that's not busted up too badly. On the used market, these are bringing about $550. Please don't buy one before I do, because I'd like to get one while they're still around $550. I think this one is an absolute modern classic. If you were looking at any of the ones on this list, this is probably one of the ones you should be looking at if you are into vintage analog synths. Now, I should give you a real warning. Newsflash, vintage synths are old. They will have problems. If you're not happy taking the thing apart to cleaning the keybed, or at least have a tech nearby who will do that kind of thing, maybe vintage synths aren't for you, and you can look at maybe buying one of the synths on my new list as a used one, which that means you probably are going to pay a little bit less. The last one is another huge famous synth used by almost everyone in the business, the Roland D50. The D50 uses LAS. Was it linear arithmetic synthesis? I don't remember what LAS stands for, but what it means is it combines samples and synthesizers. So Roland's trying to make a way of making synthesizers sound more real, but without the expense of huge long samples, which at the time required a tremendous amount of memory that was really, really expensive. So what they did is they came up with this LAS synthesis method that uses a sample just for the attack portion of the sound, and then it changes to a synthesizer to hold out the sustained part. So for a piano, which you can't hear on here for some reason because the volume's down. So for a piano, you would get a sample of the hammer hitting and the string pluck and the initial resonance, and then it would switch to a sine wave with harmonics that would then fade off, and that's your piano. So you only need a very short sample with a lot of synthesis engine behind it, and it worked really well. The D50 sold like hotcakes. It was able to emulate guitars and banjos and harpsichords and organs and everything else. It is a pad monster. They're available on the used market for around $500, which is, again, pretty much a steal. They are indestructible, they don't typically break, and you won't need to do much above maybe cleaning the keybed once in a while. And that's my top 11 used synthesizer deals on the market today. Let me know what you thought. Did I leave one out? I'm sure I know I did. I left out a ton because I had a list of about 40 to start with. What do you think should have been in this? Which ones did I include that you think shouldn't have been in this list? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. And of course, while you're leaving that comment, click like and subscribe. It really helps me out when you do that because it then takes the YouTube algorithm and says, hey, let's show this to other people that like synthesizers, and many more people get to see these videos. So I really appreciate when you do click like, subscribe, and comment down below. That's it. Thanks for watching my video. We'll see you next week.